monumental miscellanea, and funerary paraphernalia. It's Archaeodeath.
Thank you very much to start with for the invitation to come here to address you. I kind of backed into this when I retired after a rather varied career to Wales, and I discovered there was so much archaeology here, and it was crossed over with a time when the technology of drones became affordable to a guy like me. So I started photographing the Dyke a few years ago. I surveyed, as I describe it, about 20 kilometres of the Dyke. It was the part of the Dyke which was most accessible to me. In preparation for this talk, I looked through some photographs. I should say that I got in total about 60,000 photographs of archaeological objects. I winnowed this down to those which pertain to the Dyke, which gave me 7,000. Another set of filtering brought me down to 1,000. Now, that's still too much. So this is very much a selection. What you see there is the section that I have photographed, and it extends from round about Newcastle and Clun up the top, down to Evenjob at the south. I should say that I photographed this using different techniques, which I'll explain to you as I go along. But basically, I photographed it with a ground resolution of about an inch. And these are all geo-referenced. So this is a sort of view of the Dyke. It hasn't got trees, which make it brilliant for photography. And you can see how it wiggles across this section just below Llanfair Hill, and it goes down into a dip, and then on the other side you can see it continuing thereafter. This is viewing it from the other side, and one of the things which struck me very forcibly when I was looking at these images in preparation is how the Dyke is rather highlighted because it's moving through a 19th century landscape. These are all large enclosure fields around it, and those areas have been scrubbed of any visible archaeology, or pretty well. So it gives a wonderful contrast to the Dyke itself, visually. So here's it going down that hill. Again, you see the scrubbed landscape and it disappearing. And this is at Spring Hill Cottage, where there's fairly obviously, I'd say, a discontinuity, and there's a trackway crossing it. I've got to fly through these, if you'll excuse me, because there are still quite a few photographs here. Just showing this one, because these show very well this excavation on the east side of the Dyke. It's not just a matter of taking stuff out from the ditch, there is excavation taking place on this side as well. And in terms of landscape management, you've got a lot of feeding areas for cattle and sheep. Looking in the other direction, I draw your attention to, obviously, the 19th century landscape it's moving through, continues to wiggle. Next to the Dyke itself, you've got a ridgeway track, and beyond that, the farm track. It's a little hypothesis of mine that we need to pay much more attention to these ridgeways and tracks. You've got to get people up there, and very often these old prehistoric tracks are used as boundary markers. Yours is up to the track this side, mine is this side. And in this particular track, I don't know whether you can see it clearly, but it continues, it moves under the Dyke, and it's just the other side of the Dyke in the distance, in the middle distance. Now, These are simple oblique photographs, quite attractive photographs, I'd like to think, which show quite a lot of the features of the Dyke. But I also use photogrammetry. In this, I fly up and down the Dyke, and each little blob is a photograph, and put those photographs together. There may be 80, 100 photographs, and from that, I can create a photo mosaic of that area. So it puts them all together, all geo-referenced, and it can show other features. So I've got this sort of imagery of 20 kilometres of the Dyke. Now, one thing which struck me when I took this particular set of images was this area just down here, where the farm track, the ancient track, shall I call it, and the Dyke converge. When I looked closely at that, I need to point up, but there's a lone tree. But can you see this feature here? Yes. Going under the Dyke. Now, as well as taking these photographs together to create a photo mosaic, I can also create a three-dimensional model within the computer of this area. In fact, I got it for the whole of my section of the Dyke. Sorry to talk about this is my section of the Dyke. I get rather possessive about this. And what this reveals, and some of you will have seen this photograph before, can you see the rectangular feature going under the Dyke? It's on a very prominent part of the Dyke, could be a watchtower of some form, so on, but definitely pre-Dyke. If I can play with these three-dimensional objects that I create in my computer, and here you have it again, and you can see it's on its own little platform. A very nice feature earlier than the Dyke. So the techniques can be used for discovery, as well as creating insight or whatever context for the Dyke. And there we have it from almost ground level, that lone tree on that little form. Now this is a very well-trod part of the Dyke that was never recorded before. I listened with very great interest to the vulnerability of the Dyke, to Helen's talk. And here you see a section of the Dyke, which it appears has been deliberately ploughed over. I'm not quite sure what implement they used for that. But someone was making a great attempt to accelerate the erosion of that area of Dyke. I took this photograph about 3 or 4 years ago, and I'd love to go there again to see what it's like now. This is another area. You can see the Dyke going up to the gate and then disappearing into the distance. Again, a lot of tracks going over it. Erosion from an earlier time. And if I back away from that, that section was going up to the gate in the middle distance. And you see there's another section here showing similar erosion and a lot of animal erosion down here. But this is a photograph which has a lot of detail. This is near Even Job. And when I do the photogrammetry stuff on it, here's that gap that I was just pointing to. This is the first bit of erosion, and that's the second bit of erosion. And I hope you can see a lot of tracks intersecting at that point, going through the gap, the gateway feature here. And the tracks you see going across obviously predate where you put the road and the higher part of that picture, which just went straight through the Dyke. Yes, that's a different view of it. And as in the previous view, you can also see ridge and furrow in different fields, ridge and furrow going in slightly different directions in this area. That's quite a complex set of landforms there. Moving on, in fact moving up, this is the most northern point that I have so far photographed. I stress so far. And you can see the Dyke disappearing over the hills into the distance. Again, primarily through a mid-19th century enclosure type landscape. And how it curves down here to, here we are, going down there, curves to Hagen Corner. From thence, it follows the tree line, I think I've got to go across here, through the massive trees and around that hill. I looked very carefully to see if there was any sign of, where are we? Here. So here we're going the curve down, the double banked, and the Dyke continuing. I looked in this area just to the right to see if there was any sign at all of trackways going through it, and unfortunately it's been obliterated on that side. But there is some very interesting tracks going on the eastern side. In particular, from the corner, you can just see a little stub of track. There we have it. Sorry, I moved on too quickly there. So, here you can see that little stub of track coming out from that corner, and was presumably the rationale for this whole quite complex feature. And again, absolutely nothing. The obvious thing to do would have been to build it straight on and join up here. This little kink here suggests that this was a very deliberate planned structure in the construction of the Dyke. It wasn't a modification for later. And now for something completely different. In contrast with the complexity of the landscapes I've just shown you, there is nothing in this field of note. Sir Cyril Fox walked over it, found nothing. But I need to tell you that up in this corner here, that corner of the field, the Dyke comes down from the north, and there is Dyke coming down towards the south here. There's a few sheep tracks within that, but no sign of the Dyke, except I've already shown you their subtlety. Sorry, shown you how the techniques I use can be used to reveal quite subtle changes in elevation of the ground. So that when I put this through, you can see the Dyke. I hope you can see the Dyke joining the top corner to this one. And so just a few concluding pictures. This is I want to show just the varying landscapes characterising the Dyke. This is dropping down into Knighton, and here's extending to the south. And here the Dyke is really little more than a field boundary. It's a continuous field boundary, again through this 19th century landscape. And this is the southernmost part on Rushock Hill that I have photographed so far, where you can see the still wiggling Dyke going across this bit of open ground and disappears into the wood. And I hope that what I've shown is that by using these drone photographs, I've given a quick portrait of a stretch of Offa's Dyke. I've shown that it can provide a landscape context for the Dyke, and for many other things as well, but for the Dyke. It can be used as a tool of discovery and of record. And Just as a postscript, into putting it all together, I reverted to Robert Frost's poem, Mending Wall. Good fences make good neighbours. And he continues, before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offence. I rather like that. Thank you.
Sadly, we're all going to die. But while you're waiting, why not follow Archaeodeath? Subscribe now on YouTube.